Please welcome Mike McCabe.
And thank you all for being here today. I am not going to do a post-mortem on November 4th. I really want to talk about insanity. You know the definition that everybody talks about insanity, that it's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. And by that definition, there are an awful lot of people in Wisconsin politics and American politics who are insane. And that's something that we all have to come to terms with. And I want to talk specifically about ways that we have all been trained, brainwashed, if you will, to be active participants in our own disempowerment. Let me just give you a few examples. One of the ways we've been trained to think and talk about politics is we've been trained to think horizontally. We've been trained to think about who's left and who's right, who's liberal, who's conservative, who's moderate or centrist. We think along a horizontal spectrum, and our vocabulary reflects that. And we always catch ourselves putting people on that spectrum, horizontally, who's on the left and who's on the right. A magical thing happens if you flip that horizontal spectrum up on its head and you think vertically instead of horizontally. If you don't think about who's liberal or conservative, who's left or right, but you think about who's on top and who's on the bottom, who are the royals of American politics and the American economy, and who are the commoners among us? Who are our elected representatives catering to, and who are they ignoring? If you think about it in those terms, a magical thing happens. And let me give you a very practical example. I give several in the book, but let me just give you one. Take a man living in Clark County, where I grew up. Clark County is dairy country to this day. There are more cows than people in Clark County to this day. So that man in Clark County, chances are he's a farmer. Chances are he's poor, because Clark County is one of the 5 poorest counties in Wisconsin. He's white. He's Republican. You would put him on the right. You would say he's on the right. He's conservative when you position him on your political spectrum. Now take a woman living in Milwaukee. Let's say she's a nursing assistant, a CNA. So she's also struggling to make ends meet. CNAs don't make a heck of a lot of money. Chances are she's black. Chances are she's a Democrat. You would say that she's a liberal. But you flip that spectrum up on its head and you think vertically instead of horizontally, those two people are in exactly the same spot. On our horizontal spectrum, they are on opposite poles. They could not be farther apart. They are seen as having little or nothing in common. They are seen as political enemies. And yet when you think about who's on top and who's on the bottom, who's really being represented and who's being ignored, they are on the same spot on that spectrum. And just because of the way we've been trained to think and talk about politics, we're dividing people who could and should be united. I know. Just because of our own vocabulary, just because of our own habits, we're dividing people who should be allies. We need to think seriously about breaking free of that. So you've all taken a label. You wear a brand. Maybe you call yourself a liberal. Maybe you call yourself a progressive. Maybe you just call yourself a Democrat. We have to come to terms with the baggage that accompanies those labels. Whether you like it or not, you all carry baggage. Because those words have taken on meaning. They've been loaded with baggage over the course of decades, over the course of generations. The word progressive is well over 100 years old, and it doesn't mean today at all what it meant in the 1890s. What breaks my heart is that people with your values, people who want what you want for our society, are being tuned out by an awful lot of people. They shut down. They stop listening as soon as they find out you're a liberal or a progressive or a Democrat. Because of the baggage you carry, they tune you out. Because what they think when they hear the word liberal or progressive or Democrat, what they hear is, and what they think is that you are condescending, you're arrogant, you're an elitist, you think you know better than them, you think you're smarter than them, you think you know how to run their lives better than they know how to run their lives. That's what they think. That's the baggage that you carry. Whether you like it or not, unfair or not, you carry that baggage. And what I'm suggesting is that maybe it's time to honor the true progressives, to honor the original progressives, and think about what they did in their time. They too were carrying baggage, and they chose to shed it. They wore labels, and they realized those labels made people tune them out. And they did something that every batch of citizens have done when they have made landscape-altering change in American politics. Every single time that I can see, citizens started by fashioning themselves a new identity, by shedding old labels and inventing new ones. And here, so many of us are cleaving to this label progressive, when the original progressives, the first and most important thing they did was shed their old labels, get rid of that old baggage, and create a brand spanking new identity that accompanied an incredibly ambitious agenda. And they used that agenda and that new identity to change the face of American politics. But we have to challenge orthodoxy. We have to challenge the way we've been trained to think and talk and act politically if we are going to repeat history. And keep in mind, we do not have as our task making history. We've just got to repeat it. We've just got to be able to be as skillful as past generations were in making change. And we have it in our power, but we've got habits to break. And how we might take the lessons from past generations and apply them to modern circumstances and current conditions and make change in our time that is akin to what they were able to accomplish. Every single time landscape-altering change has come to American politics, the first thing citizens did was fashion themselves a new identity. We've been brainwashed to believe that there's only one currency in American politics that is relevant, only one currency that matters, only one thing that will determine success or failure in politics, and that is money. We've been trained to accept that. And what fascinates me about that acceptance is that past generations seem to instinctively understand that there were more than one form of political currency. And they put other political currencies into circulation, and they actually created concoctions powerful enough to overcome organized money. And they faced forces every bit as formidable as the forces we face. Yes, we're up against Goldman Sachs. Yes, we're up against Walmart and the Walton family. Yes, we're up against Koch Industries and the Koch brothers. Yes, we are up against Wall Street and the big banks and these enormous financial interests. But they were up against the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts. They were up against Standard Oil. They were up against the huge corporate trusts. They were up against the railroad barons and the timber barons. They faced economic forces every bit as formidable as the ones we face today and beat them. And did not beat them with money, but rather they beat them with a marriage of other political currencies. Extremely provocative ideas, extremely ambitious agendas, and they married that to organized people. And I think one of those currencies alone wouldn't have done the trick. The marriage of those currencies proved potent enough to overcome the force of organized money in their time. And we have lost faith in our capacity to do the same. We've got to come to terms with that loss of faith. And what I'm suggesting is maybe, just maybe, we ought to entertain the idea of reintroducing certain political currencies into circulation. Because it is a way out of a trap that otherwise keeps us as active participants in our own disempowerment. I told them that we have two parties in America that are failing America. We have one party that is scary and another that is scared. I've used that line countless times. I've yet to be asked by a single person in a single audience which party is which. Everybody seems to instinctively know who I'm talking about. And what I've found is that there is a massive disconnect between the party establishment and the party's grassroots. What I've found is that there is so many people at the local grassroots level who are, in one fashion or another, feeling politically homeless too. And these are the people making the phone calls and passing out the literature and knocking on the doors. These are the worker bees, the loyal card-carrying party members who are extremely disheartened. What all this suggests to me is that we are at a really important moment. And it's a moment that is so terribly and eerily reminiscent of conditions that existed in the past every time there has been massive landscape-altering change in American politics. And again, I go back to say that every time it's happened, the first step people took was to fashion themselves a new identity. But I look out at these 250 farmers, and at one point I said, how many of you own a donkey? And to my surprise, not a single hand went up. And I said, all right, how many of you own an elephant? And of course, no hands go up. And I said, okay, now, how many of you own a pair of blue jeans? And I think every single hand in the audience was up. And I said, okay, now what better symbolizes you as a people? What better represents you as a people? A donkey, an elephant, or a pair of blue jeans? And what would better distinguish you from those lording over you? The suits on Capitol Hill and on Wall Street and on K Street where the lobbyists prowl. What would better distinguish you from those who lord over you? A donkey, an elephant, or a pair of blue jeans? And that 35-year-old attorney was Robert M. La Follette. Came to be known as Fighting Bob La Follette. He called himself a progressive. And a whole bunch of other people called themselves progressives too. And when the smoke cleared from that progressive movement, we did not have 3 parties or 4 parties or 5 parties in America. We had 2. But we also had Teddy Roosevelt running for president as a progressive on the Republican ticket. And very shortly after that, we had Woodrow Wilson running for president as a progressive on the Democratic ticket for president. Both major parties were transformed. Both major parties embraced the progressive agenda. Both major parties had a hand in enacting progressive policy. Both major parties took the brand because that's where the people were. So citizens forced change within our 2-party system. They forced parties to reconnect with the people in a meaningful way. They forced parties that were failing them to come to where the people are. And what I'm suggesting is that we've reached another such moment. And for those of you who are loyal Democrats, I know that these words can hurt. Both parties are failing America. One is scary, one is scared. They are failing us in different ways, but they are failing. And change will not come from those party establishments. Change will not come from Washington, D.C. Change will come from where it has always come, and that's from amidst the people. It will bubble up from the citizenry. And what will be required is for citizens to do what has been done on multiple occasions before throughout American history, just not in our lifetimes. And it's time for us to think about doing that. We do not have to make history here. We only have to repeat it, and we have to keep that in mind. Thank you.